Don's Wife, Chapter 6, Part 1. Kamini did not go back. After hearing her side of the story, Rajni on her own went to meet her parents and tried to push for a truce, but it didn't work out. Professor Sathe and Sudha also visited Kamini twice, but she did not relent. Empathizing with her state of mind, Rajni also thought it proper not to press her any further, lest she charge out of her place too, which she had already hinted at a couple of times. Instead, one day she brought Kamini's clothes and other important stuff from her parents' house to make her feel more at home in her bed. External disasters like wars, building collapses, air crashes, as well as natural calamities like quakes, floods, cyclones, all have a devastating effect on human life. Great many people die, many families get uprooted, and many relationships get destroyed. Mostly, all that happens in an instant. Human mind can and does cope with it without any excuses volunteered, without any explanations sought. But how do you handle a catastrophe which acutely conflicting dispositions of human minds suddenly throw you in? Kamini found herself flung into a whirlpool of violent cross currents with no anchor or refuge in sight. A spectre of impossible options. How do you cut off a relationship that you so fondly and so intimately nurtured for so long? How do you discard the anguished cry of a human soul after igniting hope in its deepest elements? And how do you give up on your parents, howsoever unfair might be their proposition? The only thing Kamini could do and chose to do was stand still, do nothing. It saved her from imploding within herself. She privatized herself. She did not go into a cocoon or some such thing. She simply went off radar for all. She switched off her cell and stopped carrying it with her. But the tentative date for their marriage was approaching fast. A lot of preparations had to be made and cards had to be printed, which was making everybody quite nervous. But she was completely incommunicado. Her exams were also round the corner, and that became her concern as well as her panacea. The university library became her refuge. One day, while browsing through a row of shelves for a particular book, she came face to face with Harsh. Everything melted for her at once. Her eyes, his eyes, their bodies, the surroundings. He proposed a coffee. Strange how you become strangers if you try to pull out of a bond with unexplained reasons or unexpressed apologies. None spoke for quite some time. A spoon stirring the sugar, a cup lifted up for a sip and then replaced, and the wrapper of a piece of cake torn open were the only sounds on their table for a few minutes. He broke the ice. How have you been? Fine. And you? Fine. Quite fine, indeed, he said, pretending to be normal. They again relapsed into an uncomfortable silence. This time she broke it, spluttering. Look, I wanted to... Don't explain. He cut her short. gesturing with his hand, and said lightly, I know. You know? She was taken by complete surprise. How do you know? My father is wired into both the worlds, under and over, both. He told you? How could he tell me himself? For the obvious reasons between us. Bhau filled me in. She did not respond, just rotated her cup in the saucer, feeling a trifle uncomfortable. I always feared this. His world robbing me of my world. That's why. That's precisely why. I wanted to get away from his world. He said bitterly. It's not a nice thing to say. You are being very uncharitable towards your father. She protested. Uncharitable? That's a big word. In fact, quite beyond me. When I am simply talking about my feelings concerning a very important matter of my life, which has suddenly taken a bad turn, not because of something I did, but because of what he did, or because of what he is. Sorry, but I would still say you are being unfair, because you don't know how he is feeling about it. What would he feel about it? Harsh sat dismissively at first, and then turned bitter again. It doesn't concern him. It concerns me. How do you know it doesn't concern him? Maybe it concerns him more than you have figured out. She suddenly felt very protective about R.D. Why are you siding with him suddenly? I am not siding with him. I am genuinely concerned about him. She stressed that she did not like his insensitivity towards his father, because I can guess how he must be feeling about it. So what do you want to do about it? He was somewhat taken aback at her response. I want to meet him. Will he meet me? Why do you say this? I mean, after all this, my disappearance bit. I met you. I made an effort, he said with a sneer. She could see he was hurting. She stretched out her hand and put it on his and said comfortingly, I know how you feel. I feel the same. Tears flashed in her eyes. He felt good and put his other hand on top of her hand covering his. A lot of unsaid got said. Will you arrange this? She asked, a tiny smile appearing on her lips. I'll talk to Bhau about it, he said, patting her hand. Still in her nightdress, Kamini was beating the egg for the omelette she was going to make when the doorbell rang. Rajni was in the shower, hence she had to answer it. Continuing to beat the egg, she went to the door. Two old men, both wearing long plastic raincoats and their heads covered by rain caps with side flaps, stood facing her. They were fully drenched as it had been raining outside. You called for the electrician? Said the shorter one, who was partly hidden by the taller man in front of him, whose bushy moustache and thick grandfather glasses covered a good bit of his face. Alas, my friend, she said hurriedly and shut the door before they could say anything further. Rajni denied that she had called for any electrician. Kamini left the bowl with the egg mass in the kitchen and quickly put on a housecoat before returning to the door, just as they rang the doorbell again. Opening the door, she said evasively, No, we didn't call for any electrician. But at least you can offer us those beautiful smelling omelets you are going to make, said the taller man, peeling off his moustache. Kamini was shocked to see R.D. and Bhau in front of her. They were both now recognizable, having also removed their hideous-looking workmen's caps. R.D. Sahib! Bhau! She exclaimed with joy. You gave me a shock. Come in, come in. I'll just make the omelettes. Rajni, who had also joined them at the small dining table, having finished her shower, doubled up with laughter on hearing their antics and pulled Kamini's leg. Gosh, Kammo, you should have realized our Sahib's penchant for drama. Hey, don't take it lightly, girls. It was a device to keep ourselves inconspicuous. You know how things are, R.D. said solemnly. The girls were amused to learn from Bhau that even outside the building, their people were hanging about, masquerading as a vegetable seller, a shoeshine boy, a knife sharpener, or some such, for reasons of security. The simple breakfast of omelettes, pav, and tea turned out to be a happy event, accompanied by laughter, leg pulling, and the retelling of jovial anecdotes. All traces of tension regarding the issue at hand melted away. Kamini was bidding her time to open up to R.D., but he outmaneuvered her. He helped her carry the plates into the kitchenette for washing. Bhau and Rajni hung about in the sitting room, knowing that they were going to talk. As Kamini helped R.D. with some more water from the fridge, the latter said good-humouredly, How can a girl who makes such wonderful omelettes be so unhappy inside? What? She was taken aback and tried to be normal. How can you say that, sir? Don't punish yourself, Pete. I understand things. There is no fault of yours in any way. She just lowered her head and said nothing, amazed at the man's perceptiveness, who was at once a friend, a father, and a punster. He surprised her further, revealing, You know, one day, Champa ने मेरी बहुत चंपी की. Champi? Yes, champi means dressing down. She gave me a hell of a dressing down once. My fault? I had been hard on someone who had defied me on some point. That was when I was just starting out with the Bhailo and people had started recognizing me as the Mawali of the gully, the rogue of the neighborhood. I would do things at the bidding of our bhai. This chap had been told not to park his thela, that is push cart, at a particular spot which had been assigned to some other hawker pursuing the illegal trade in the flea market. In my enthusiasm to please the bhai, I broke his thela and beat him to pulp. Champa got the wind of it. She learnt that the poor chap had severe asthma, and the place I had allowed him to trade was right next to the gutter, which was badly affecting his health. Besides being a very smelly spot, it hardly attracted any customer. Boy, did I get a verbal hiding. She was furious and unsparing. When I argued that he could have told me his real problem, she was absolutely livid, questioning as to what kind of a bhai I was, if I could not know that guy's problem without him telling me. There were tears in his eyes as he remarked, Oh, she was a terror. I tell you, that Champa. You loved her very much, didn't you? Kamini said sincerely, with her eyes turning wet. I don't know what it is, but I know that she is within me, right inside me, he said with a smile as he wiped his tears, then turned to her again with a broad grin. Now you tell me, if she is inside me, how can I be so selfish that I tear you out of your family's picture? Champa will kill me if I separate you from your parents. But don't say a word, he cut her. Go back to them. They love you and are waiting for you. I've met them. You met them about this already? Yes, I went over to see them. They are missing you so much. Go. Go back home. He was smiling again. Fresh tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at him disbelievingly. He moved closer and tenderly wiped them off with his fingers. Then he stretched his arms and held her shoulders from either side. He stared at her fondly for a couple of seconds before saying admiringly, "You are truly a chand ka tukda." Well, if not as a daughter-in-law, at least I have gained a daughter in you, right? She nodded. You'll go home? She nodded again. He leaned forward and kissed her on the forehead. Then he patted her on the shoulder and left. Tears flowed out of her eyes as she followed him into the sitting room. But he had already sipped out with Bhau, and Rajni had just shut the door after them. She moved to the window and saw quite a few anonymous men, shoppers, hawkers, and policeman types gather around him. In no time, Bhau and he had melted among the stall owners and shoppers. End of Part 1, Chapter 6.